In 1940, Soviet engineers built a tank so big that German soldiers later nicknamed it the Russian Dreadnought. It carried a gun meant for field artillery, a 152mm howitzer that could smash concrete bunkers with a single round. It was called the KV-2, and nothing else on the battlefield looked remotely like it. The turret alone stood higher than a man. Inside, its crew fought a weapon that kicked like a building collapsing. It could shatter a pillbox in one shot, but then the crew had to spend close to a minute reloading it. In a war that demanded speed, that minute was fatal. The KV-2's story starts not with Germany, but Finland. In late 1939, the Soviet Union invaded its neighbor in what became the Winter War. Finnish defenses weren't mobile tank armies. They were networks of concrete bunkers and pillboxes dug into the forests and lakes of the Karelian Isthmus. Soviet armor, light BT series tanks, and early models of the T-26 couldn't break them. Shells bounced off, infantry stalled, and engineers had to drag up field guns at close range under fire. When the war finally ended, the Red Army had learned a blunt truth. It needed a tank that could bring its own siege gun. At the same time, a new heavy tank design was underway at the Kirov factory in Leningrad under engineer Joseph Kotin, the KV-1, named after party official Klim Voroshilov. The KV-1 had thick armor and a 76mm gun, enough for other tanks, but useless against concrete. Kotin's team decided to build a variant that could destroy bunkers outright. The solution fit a 152mm M10 howitzer, normally mounted on a towed artillery carriage, directly onto the KV-1 chassis. That decision created an entirely new category, a self-propelled bunker buster. To carry the howitzer, engineers built a new turret the size of a small shed. It was welded from thick armor plates, roughly 2.5 meters tall, square-sided to fit the massive breech and recoil system. The turret itself weighed several tons and added enough height that the KV-2 stood nearly 4 meters tall. Taller than most houses in the countryside, it fought through. The gun was the 152mm M10, designed for firing high-explosive shells that weighed almost 40 kilograms each. It could destroy concrete bunkers or blow apart a fortified position, but it was never meant for the cramped confines of a turret. 2 loaders had to wrestle each shell into the breech. When the gun fired, the whole tank rocked. Early tests actually snapped the mounting bolts, forcing reinforcements across the turret ring. Weight climbed to nearly 58 tons. The engine, a 600 horsepower Vi 2 diesel, could move it on paper, but barely. Top speed on road was about 25 kilometers per hour. Off-road, it dropped into the single digits. Turning the turret by hand took muscle and patience. The gear ratio was so slow that a full rotation could take several minutes. By mid-1940, the prototype passed trials. The Red Army approved it for production as the KV-2 heavy assault tank. It wasn't elegant, but it did exactly what the generals had ordered: carry the biggest gun possible straight through the front line. The KV-2 wasn't just big, it was absurd by 1940 standards. It weighed nearly 58 tons, making it one of the heaviest tanks in the world at the time. Its engine, a 600 horsepower V2 diesel, gave it a power-to-weight ratio of barely 10 horsepower per ton, less than half that of a medium tank. The armor was thick, 75mm on the front, 60 on the sides, enough to shrug off most German anti-tank guns of the early war. But that protection came with a price. The enormous turret raised the center of gravity so high that crews were told not to traverse it on uneven ground. The tank could literally tip over. Armament was the reason for all this compromise. The 152mm M10 howitzer firing a high-explosive shell the size of a man's arm. Muzzle velocity, about 436 meters per second, slow by tank standards. But a single hit could destroy a pillbox or dismember a Panzer IV. The tank carried roughly 36 rounds, split between massive shells and separate powder charges. There was no commander's cupola, only narrow vision slits. Inside, it was deafening and cramped. Soviet test reports called the layout extremely inconvenient for continuous operation. It was, as one modern historian put it, a bunker designed to attack other bunkers. The KV-2 entered service just months before Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union, in June 1941. By then, only a few hundred had been built, mostly assigned to heavy tank regiments near the western frontier. When the German advance hit the town of Raseiniai in Lithuania, one KV-2 accidentally became a one-tank fortress. Accounts differ, but both German and Soviet reports describe a single KV-2 holding a crossroads for nearly 2 days, blocking supply routes for the 6th Panzer Division. Panzer III and IV tanks couldn't penetrate its armor. Anti-tank guns bounced rounds off the turret. When German engineers tried to sneak close with explosives, the KV-2's 152mm gun turned them into debris. Only when the tank ran out of ammunition and fuel did the crew abandon it. The Germans had to use 88mm Flak guns to finally destroy it. The story became legend, proof that the KV-2 could dominate any duel if it didn't break down first. For every heroic stand like Raseiniai, dozens of KV-2s were lost to mechanical failure or lack of fuel long before they met the enemy. The KV-2's gun could annihilate anything it hit. The problem was hitting again. Reloading the 152mm howitzer was a full-body workout. Each round was 2 parts, the shell and the powder case. The loaders had to wrestle them into the breech one at a time, while the gun was fixed at a specific loading angle. That meant after every shot, the gunner had to lower the barrel, wait for the loaders, then re-aim the entire turret before firing again. Under good conditions, the reload took 35 to 45 seconds. Under combat stress, with the tank tilted or the crew exhausted, it could easily stretch past a minute. Combine that with the hand-cranked turret drive, a full 360 degrees turn taking almost a minute, and the tank felt agonizingly slow in a fight. Crews joked that by the time they reloaded, the enemy had gone home. The hour-long reload became their way of saying the KV-2 was a siege gun pretending to be a tank. Its power was unmatched, its tempo hopeless. The KV-2 was designed for a war that no longer existed. Its reason for being, smashing bunkers, made sense in the slow trench warfare of the Winter War. But by 1941, the Eastern Front was a war of movement. Germany's panzer divisions swept across open terrain, encircling Soviet formations. A 58-ton tank that crawled at walking speed simply couldn't keep up. Its transmission and clutch were fragile, breaking down after a few dozen kilometers. Its height, nearly 4 meters, made it an easy artillery target. A KV-2 stuck in the mud or stranded without fuel was impossible to recover. Crews often blew them up to prevent capture. The Kirov factory stopped production by mid-1941 after roughly 200 to 330 units had been built. By early 1942, there were almost none left in frontline service. The Red Army moved on to simpler self-propelled guns like the Su-152 and later ISU-152, nicknamed Zveroboy, or the Beast Killer. That one mounted the same 152mm firepower on lower, lighter hulls with fixed superstructures instead of a massive turret. In short, the KV-2 was already obsolete within a year of its first battle. Most KV-2s were lost in the first 6 months of the war, not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure, lack of fuel, or abandonment during retreats. A handful were captured by the Germans, who sometimes repaired and used them for local defense under the designation Panzerkavallerie 2754. They served in places like Finland and the Leningrad front, but only briefly. Spare parts were non-existent. After 1942, the type effectively disappeared from Soviet order of battle. The KV program itself evolved into the KV-85, then the IS, Joseph Stalin, heavy tank series, which replaced the bulky KV line entirely by 1943. By the end of World War II, every surviving KV-2 had either been destroyed, scrapped for armor plate, or left rusting in captured territories. Post-war, none remained in active service. The Soviet Army officially decommissioned the last examples in 1945 from training and test facilities. Today, only a few reconstructions and partial originals survive. One at Tank Museum outside Moscow, and another composite display in Parola, Finland, both restored from wartime wrecks. That's the real afterlife of the KV-2, a museum piece rebuilt from fragments. The KV-2 never lived long enough to become legendary in the way the T-34 or IS-2 did.